welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning for this great panel discussion, Turning Customers into Advocates. This is brought to you by SalesPOP Online Sales Magazine, that's salespop.pipelinersales.com, and by Pipeliner CRM, that's pipelinersales.com, Instant Intelligence Visualized. And today I'm delighted to welcome a fantastic panel of experts who are going to talk to us today and discuss the whole area of turning customers into advocates. So I'm actually going to ask each of them to introduce themselves rather than me reading off their bios. So Dennis Synal, why don't you give us a quick overview of who you are and what you do?
Good afternoon. My name is Dennis Synal, and I'm very excited to be with you today. We've been in the CRM space since 1992. The term CRM did not even exist. We specialize in working with customers, better managing their business processes and leveraging that technology in the CRM software, helping them gain traction with their existing and new customers.
Excellent. And also joining Dennis today is Joel Capperella.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me today. Again, my name is Joel Capperella. I'm the principal of Capperella Strategies and Inflection Methods. And what we do is we specialize in helping companies tell a much bigger story that's dramatic in nature. And that does two things. Certainly increases awareness and lead activity. But more importantly, it enables the sales team to get more into those early stages of the funnel. Happy to be here today. Love this topic. Customer advocacy is right in line with making sure you're telling a story that resonates with those that you're selling to.
Yeah. And finally, we have, last but not least, Adrian Davis. Unfortunately, you'll see Adrian's name is Adrian David in the panel up here on GoToMeeting, but that is my fault because I typed it incorrectly. But it's Adrian Davis. Welcome, Adrian.
Thank you very much, and greetings, everyone. Likewise, happy to be here. I run a consulting firm called Whetstone, and our focus is really on helping organizations win, keep, and grow their key accounts. We believe very strongly in the 80-20 rule. A lot of time is wasted on chasing a lot of different types of customers, when really if you understood what your ideal customer profile is and you were able to zero in on those types of customers, attract them, win them, and grow them, you can significantly grow your business. We've helped organizations double their businesses in a short order of time just through this process. So, 30-year veteran in sales, and really happy to be here and talk about this topic of customer advocacy. It's very close to what we do.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to just launch a quick poll for everybody who has joined us here. If you could just for one moment fill in and tell us exactly what your role is. So if you could go ahead and start filling that in, that would be really helpful. Just going to take a couple of moments on this. Again, today's subject is customer advocacy. It's a term that is, bandied about a lot, but probably not as well understood as it could be. And I think today we're going to shed some light on that. So again, if you have a chance, please just give us quickly vote here in the poll and tell us, what your actual role is. I'm going to close the poll in just a second here. All right, I'm going to close the poll and just share the results quickly. So you can see 22% salespeople, 11% sales operations, 44% executives, and 22% others. Okay. All right, let's go with the first question. So here's an interesting one. What's the difference between a customer being a reference and being an advocate? Because I feel sometimes this is a confused topic. So maybe, Adrian, do you want to kick this off and kind of give me your definition?
Sure. I mean, I would say all references are advocates, but not all advocates. I should say all advocates are references, but not all references are advocates. Mm-hmm. I'd say a reference is more passive. That if I ask you as a customer who's had a good experience with me, if I ask you to stand in for me or to be a testimonial, you'll do that. You'll be a great reference for me, but you're passive. An advocate is so moved by the transformative experience that you've had with them or that they've had with you that they will proactively advocate for you. They will proactively support you. They'll introduce you to people within the organization, new stakeholders, as well as those outside of the organization. So I would say the difference is one of, passive and reactive and responding to requests versus proactively going out and supporting and promoting you.
Yeah, and how about you, Dennis?
I agree with Adrian. My experience has shown that we're able to ask for references all the time, and they're very defined. I pick up the phone and I call an existing customer and ask them if I can use them as a reference to simply qualify what we've done. But when you look in the sales positions, and one of the key things is we ask, have you identified the champion? That's that advocate. That's that gentleman that you want, or that person that is in that business that is supporting you all the way. He's aware of you, your brand awareness, and what you're bringing to the table. I really agree with Adrian there.
Mm-hmm. And how about you, Joel? How would you define it?
Yeah, John, you know what? First of all, I love the topic because it's so important today. And I think the biggest thing is, what are you asking your customers to be advocates of, right? If we're honest with ourselves, even in this age of disruption, there's so much commoditization as far as what our products and our services do. And that's just a fact. And that's the way many times our buyers look at what we do. Therefore, are we asking them to reference, yeah, we did what we said we were going to do, and they got away with a pretty good experience? Or are we asking them to advocate for what we're all about? And what are we all about, right? And by the way, a lot of sales leaders and executives on the call, I would encourage you, when you walk away from this call today, to go hit your marketing team up and say, what is the story that our advocates are telling? What are they actually advocating us for? Right. So I think that kind of therein lies the difference as far as what's the difference between a reference. Hey, did our features, functions, service, and value match what we said? Yes, that's kind of standard. Or can they actually be, as Dennis said, a champion of what we're all about in the marketplace?
Excellent. So what do you need to do? What strategies do you need to put in place in order to get a customer to be an advocate? So maybe Dennis, if you want to start off on this one.
Well, there's a lot of different places to start, but a lot of it starts right at the beginning, is creating conversations with your customer, getting to know them getting to know you. If I look at it another way, people buy from people. Put some FaceTime in, get to know them personally. People don't spend the time today in the sales world getting to know their customer, and the customer getting to know the salesperson. Getting to know each other intimately, you can start addressing what everyone's concerns are and how can you jointly get to where you want to be. And quite often we think we have all the answers, and we don't quite tell our customers, hey, I was wrong. Maybe we can look another way at what we're doing. So you start building that relationship with them, and the trust factor. It's a key to success in long-term engagements.
Oh, great point. And how about you, Adrian? What strategies or steps do you need to put in place to get somebody from customer to advocate?
Yeah, I think I would just jump off from what Dennis said there, John, about jointly getting to where we want to be. It's a joint journey to value. And I think often we are so consumed with what we do, and we impose it on our customers, and we hope it works out. What we don't do, and what our salespeople should do, is really try to figure out, for this customer, what does success look like? And then once we understand what their strategic objectives are, what are the metrics that will help us put our arms around that success, that will help us understand that we have in fact achieved their vision of success? What are the challenges that they're going to be facing as they try to achieve this success? I think really immersing ourselves in our customers' world, in their perception of success, and in the metrics that are important to them. When we move the needle, that needle needs to be the customer's metrics. Mm-hmm. And I think if we can orient our sales people to really immerse themselves in the customer's world and advocate for the customer, then once we achieve that success and everybody is clear, we have helped the customer obtain their definition and their vision of success. It just stands to reason that they in turn will then advocate for us.
Great. And what about you, Joel? What would you advise? How would you advise people to, or what strategies would you put in place to get somebody to be an advocate?
Yeah, well, listen, I think the first thing is to actually have a strategy, right? I can't tell you how many of my clients don't have, they all know they need referenceability and customer advocacy, but they don't have a plan defined on how they're going to capitalize upon it. And to echo what Adrian was saying there, that's a perfect place to start because your customers care very intimately about their metrics, right? They're their metrics that dictates how they're performing. We hope to affect those metrics positively. But here's the key, I think, as far as developing a strategy. Go 2 or 3 steps behind what those metrics are. In other words, what's going on behind the scenes? So if the metrics is days sales outstanding, right, and your service or your product decreases DSO, right, what does it mean to the company in real terms if they can't do that, if they can't decrease their revenue flow and they can't increase and accelerate their revenue and decrease DSO? What does that actually mean? Does it mean they have to they can't do the next round of strategic hiring? Does it mean they have to delay the product launch? Does it mean that they can't penetrate a new market that they've been anxious to penetrate? And therein lies the strategy for securing honest to goodness customer advocacy. As much as we love our products and services, our customers aren't thinking about that. As much as they love their metrics, they think in a lot more nuance than just those metrics. So the key is 2 things. One, have a strategy. And secondly, actually understand the narrative of what lies behind the numbers.
Absolutely. And just before we get to the next question, I just think something interesting came up through this whole conversation here, or this particular part of the conversation, and that's about engaging with customers. And as you said, Dennis, people buy from people, etc. And you were saying, Joel, get behind the numbers. And Adrian, are we losing sight of that, do you think, because everything has become so there's so much technology, things have become so impersonal, it's so easy just to fire off emails, or that we have lost that personal touch, and the fact is that without that you can't get to advocacy. Would that be right? Would you agree with that, Dennis?
I agree with that 100%. There is nothing better or stronger than building that relationship and gaining that trust factor between the business owner and the salesperson, or both business owners on both sides, knowing that we want to achieve a goal, and that's to help each other get to where they want to be. And with that personal approach, it is more important because you're not in that cold technology environment where you're picking up a cell phone, sending out an email and saying, hey, are you interested in buying this? We're not buying light bulbs. If we're working in the space that we want to grow our customer and grow our relationship and generate reoccurring revenue for ourselves, we also want the customer to be growing to be able to come back to us. And that personal relationship is key number 1.
Okay. All right, let's move on. And Adrian, do you want to kick off with this one? So, okay, once you get a customer to become an advocate, what are some of the ways that you can effectively leverage that?
I think the first thing that comes to mind when I think of this question is to realize that you're vulnerable. That advocacy is in the moment. You have done something, you've completed a project for me, and I'm just thrilled, and I'm happy to advocate for you. But the world is constantly changing. The demands that I'm facing are constantly changing, and therefore my perception of value is constantly changing. So I think the worst thing we can do is rest on our laurels. So I think job number 1 is to really understand, and just sort of pick up what Joel was saying earlier. We would put it in the words of understanding the value story. And that's not so much, what is our narrative, it's about what is the customer's narrative, and how does our value fit into their story, and how is their world changing. So we need to have an eye on value that we're delivering today, but we also have to have an eye on how the perception of value will change based on the challenges that my customer is facing and how their world is changing. So I think number 1 is realize that when you have an advocate, you're vulnerable. Advocacy is fragile. And so really dig in deep, as Joel was saying, understand the story behind the numbers, and make sure that you can connect with multiple stakeholders, other business units, other leaders within the organization, and expand your footprint within the organization. Don't rest on your laurels. And then number two, once you have really delivered that value story to that customer and you understand it, find other customers like that customer. Find other customers who are facing similar challenges and share your narrative with them, because that's going to resonate with them when they see like, okay, you really get this. You understand the challenges we're facing. They're going to be much more open to you. So, two things. Number one, dig deep with your customer. Don't take it for granted. Spread your footprint. Find new stakeholders. Find new business units. See how you can expand your value story. See how their world is changing so that you can continue to deliver value over time. And then number two, find customers like the customer that you're succeeding with, that you can then leverage the insights that you've gained with these other customers.
Excellent, very good. And Joel, how do you advise people to effectively leverage customer advocates?
Sure, John, and I'll go back to what I said initially, is to have a plan, right? In other words, once you start to develop your customer advocacy, determine how you're going to actually use that network of advocacy, right? And I think the biggest thing that we fail to do is we fail to ask, right? We fail to ask for them to step up and speak and things like that. And we're at a really opportunistic time, right? Because, early thousands, if I wanted somebody to do a press piece for me, I had to go, and the company was large, I had to go not just through my user of my service or my product, but also their leadership, and then likely the PR team of that company, and likely the legal team of that company. Well, today we're able to produce media so easily and quickly that I don't have to go through all those channels. Now, you might not necessarily be able to use the customer's company if they're speaking ad hoc without all those approvals and permissions, but it's a kind of ask forgiveness, not permission type of thing. If we can get them, I think the biggest thing you could do to start leveraging them is ask them to start talking frequently and often. Source PR opportunities for them. If you have a PR investment, within your organization, start to instruct your PR team to place the customer front and center. That does two things. First, a lot more, if we put a press release out about our latest product launch or our latest win, newsflash, nobody cares. That's just a fact. Nobody cares about those things. But if we put forth a story within the industry about something that we solve, and it's oh, by the way, our company helped do it, but the story is this person, John or Jane Doe, who actually made it a reality. Instruct your PR team to start leveraging your customer advocates to give them presence. Now, look, that's good for you for obvious reasons. It's also good for your customer because it promotes their professional profile as well.
Excellent. And Dennis, quickly too, what are some of the ways that you effectively leverage your customers as advocates?
When currently and in the past, and we've done this a number of times, if we were hosting a luncheon or a seminar keyed around a solution that we're going to provide, we would bring in a customer to speak about his experience on how his solution has overcome this exact same problem. And one of the things that I've learned is that, believe me, customers love to speak about their success.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. Okay, so there's a lot of work that goes into getting a customer to be an advocate, okay? And oftentimes, right, it's like any relationship, it's in the initial blushes of that relationship when everything's wonderful and you've sold and everybody's happy and you're engaging and all of that. But as the customer life cycle goes on, sometimes that can wane and maybe some problems come up, et cetera, but how do you keep a customer as an advocate for the long term? So maybe Joel, do you want to kick off with this one?
Yeah, once again, I know I might sound like a broken record, but have a plan, right? Have a plan in place for how you're going to do this, right? And what I would recommend, I'll give you a story here. I was at before I had my own business, I was running a marketing group for a $500 million global services firm. And one of those pieces of software we used, I was invited as a guest to preferred customers, right, at their annual conference. And while it was very nice, it was a very nice dinner, got to talk with the CEO and some of the key members there. It ended there, right? So it was 20 of us. Okay, they must have thought my business was important to them in some way. They must have seen me as an advocate, right? But I didn't know why I was there. There was no follow-up or no value other than I got a good meal that night. And there was no sense of I don't want to, no sense of ask. They didn't ask me anything other than keep paying my subscription fee, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a missed opportunity for this organization. The dinner is obviously a good idea, and having a core group of customers that you're going to bring together in some kind of periodic basis, like at an annual user event, makes sense. But make sure they know why they're there, and make sure they know what they're being asked to do. That is, look, it's a mutually beneficial relationship. Now, as far as the long term goes, I think continuity has a lot to do with that. If they like whoever's serving their account and that person moves on, make sure that transition to whoever's going to be servicing the account thereon after is involved in that transition. They know who they are, and that level of continuity is maintained. I think those two things are key, especially the idea of continuity of service.
Excellent. Dennis, what about you? How do you keep a customer and advocate in the long term?
Well, it goes back to the relationship for me is maintain that relationship. And I believe Adrian mentioned earlier about things constantly change. So if you maintain that relationship and your customer's business is constantly changing, change with him, help him through his changes, and stay by his side. Keep delivering.
Excellent. And you, Adrian?
Yeah, I think Dennis nailed it there with keep delivering. And the only way you can keep delivering, I think, is if you fall in love with the problem and not your solution.
Mm-hmm.
So falling in love with the problem means really getting in and understanding what is the challenge here that my customer is facing? What are the implications of this challenge? And specifically, what are the strategic implications? And I think a lot of times we're delivering solutions, but we don't attach the solution to the customer's strategy. And therefore, by implication, the solution is tactical and the solution has an expiry date. The only way that we can really build relationships with customers over time is if we are strategically significant to them. And so I think our solutions must be strategic, they must be delivered over time, and they have to be differentiated. So we need to understand what is it about our solution from the customer's perspective that is differentiated from anybody else that could be delivering solutions to them. And then finally, we need to document our value. And I think a lot of the teams that we work with initially, when we look at their work, this is like kind of unanimously where everybody falls down. They do good work. They just don't document their work, and they don't document their work in terms of its impact from the customer's perspective. So I think really getting in there and being able to understand, which metrics were important to the customer, and how did we move them, and by how much. And being able to go back to the customer and constantly put that in front of them to say, look, we are truly your partners here. Look how we are working together. And then while we're doing that, we should be constantly building a library of other challenges that the customer is facing and brainstorming with them about things that we could do together. So I think the most effective firms that I've seen, they actually have a library of initiatives that they could be working on with their customers. And sort of on a quarterly basis, they sit down, they do their quarterly business reviews, and it's like, okay, what should we be working on next? This project is now coming to a close. We've done really well. We highlighted last time that these are 3 other areas that were very important to you, and here are 5 or 6 initiatives that we had identified. Which one would you like us to be working on next? And so I think that constant stream of how we can move the metrics that matter to you. And it's not like in the spur of the moment trying to dream something up. It's like just a very conscientious approach of documenting our value and tracking other areas where we can have an impact.
Yeah, and that's great. And I think you've touched on a very important point. It's one thing that we at Pipeliner do ourselves with our customer success group. And I think a lot of people overlook at times and especially if you're selling something like a software platform or something where you're selling something that's there for the long term or, for a significant amount of time. And that's the imperatives that drove the initial purchase by the customer can change over time. Just like you say, they don't always remain the same. And if you're not constantly going back or regularly going back and saying, well, this was this was your initiative. This is why you purchased this product or service initially. How has that gone? And is that still your main strategic push? And then you'll often discover it's changed, and then you need to adjust your value with that change. But I think, and it certainly echoes what Dennis said earlier, and Joel, about that. Joel having a strategy, and Dennis about staying in contact with them, so you understand how things change over time. Okay, so let's flip it around, okay, a little bit. Let's turn that frown upside down. What happens when you've had a customer, they were an advocate for you, but something happened, and these things happen in every organization, and they no longer feel that they can be an advocate for you. What do you do to turn this around? And maybe Dennis, go first on this.
Well, the first question I have is, why did that happen? I'll ask myself that question. Where did we go wrong?
Mm-hmm.
What didn't we deliver? What expectations weren't met? Yeah. What perception did the customer feel is not there versus what we perceived he wanted? Find out what the problem is. Solve it. Sit down together. No one person has all the answers. And if the issue is some miscommunication, get it solved. You can turn a customer around if you're truly honest with them and trying to help and not run away from the problem.
Right, and I think it's fair to say, Dennis, probably if somebody has gone who was an advocate and no longer feels like they can advocate for you, there's obviously we've made some missteps along the way in the relationship.
Yes, yeah.
What about you, Joel? How would you address a situation like this? Because obviously it takes a lot to get a customer to be an advocate, and then to lose them as an advocate is pretty devastating.
It's true, and I think we have to be pretty practical in this area. And I think the three keys here, as far as what happens when an advocacy kind of goes south on us, we have to keep three things in mind. One, we have to continuously have a pipeline of advocates. So just like you manage, look, we're all sales professionals here on the call. We know very well what our pipeline metrics need to be. We need to treat our advocacy the same way. And why? Because you know what, we might lose one or two this year that were go-tos for us. So I know the question is, how do I turn it around? I'll get to that in just a second, right? But the first things first is let's aggressively manage our pipeline of advocacy. That's the first thing. Second is, again, practically speaking, is what is the shelf life of the advocacy that we've accumulated with that customer? So if customer X no longer could be an advocate today, we still have materials that we could use in the sales cycle and developing the relationships with new prospects and things like that. So determine the shelf life of what that advocate has already invested in with you. And then these are very two practical things to do. The third is, and I would echo what Dennis says, is figure out what is exactly at issue, and then strive to make it a comeback story, right? So turn the initial story of advocacy into one of comeback, right? Because that's nothing more powerful than an underdog kind of comeback story. So if you look at it as an opportunity for a higher level of advocacy, then you identify what the issues are, why they've kind of removed their advocacy off the table, and then what can you do to recapture it?
Excellent. And then Adrian, what would you do in a situation like this?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, what Dennis said about understanding why, because in some cases it's not recoverable. Mm-hmm. The company could have been purchased, they could have new management, there could be structural reasons why there just isn't an alignment anymore between your firm and the firm that was advocating for you. So I think understanding why, and is it recoverable? If it's not recoverable, then we want to make sure that they're not going to do damage to the reputation. If somehow we have fallen down and we have failed to deliver and there's now hostility rather than advocacy, mm-hmm. That becomes like your major priority. This becomes an urgent matter. But if it's just a matter of the firm has changed direction and we're no longer strategically aligned, then I think that's just par for the course. And as Joel was saying, having a pipeline of advocates is important, but being very careful about who's in that pipeline. I think the worst thing we can do, I shouldn't say the worst thing, probably there are worse things, but a bad thing for us is to have somebody lined up as an advocate that isn't strategically aligned with us. And so we started investing in this organization only to find, 6, 12 months later, you know what, we're actually pointing in two different directions here. And our investments in this firm are actually creating unreasonable tension and pressure within the organization. So have a pipeline of advocates, but have a filter for who gets in the pipeline, because those advocates are going to require investment of time, attention, resources, and we want to make sure that they're strategically aligned.
Yeah, I think that's a that's a really important point. And actually, somebody asked a question here, or a comment maybe, to say that part of it is going back to selection, and I think it's what Joel said earlier, and that is, selecting who may be a good advocate for you, a good candidate, and who may not. And basically, and I think Joel, you'd agree, like not all customers make good advocates, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Adrian kind of touched on that very well. Is you certainly just as it's important to define who our key prospects are and who the right personas are that we ought to be marketing to and selling to, you have to do the same exact thing here, right? So it ends up being, this is why companies shy away from referenceability and advocacy, because it's a lot of work, right? But it can be made quick work if we know exactly what it looks like. If we know what the right advocate looks like, what their makeup is, how big their workforce is, what the type of leader they have in place, the success that they've had with the product or the service.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's true, because the more time you spend with the customer, the more you get to know them, the more you'll know that fit.
Excellent. Well, Dennis, why don't you go ahead with this, our last major question for this discussion. So I always like to give people real practical steps, the listeners and viewers. So if somebody doesn't have a customer advocacy program, or thinks that just maybe getting a couple of case studies or a testimonial is all they need to do, how would you advise them to take their first steps on the journey of turning customers into advocates?
The first step, well, the key there is the words actually in your question. Learn to listen.
Right.
Learn to listen. Learn to listen to your customer. When you're listening, you'll understand them. When you understand them, you can then help them. You're not just there to deliver something that you want to give to them. You want to actually help them. And to do that, not only engage the customer, but engage the staff. Make them a part of what you're delivering, or whatever product you're delivering, or whatever solution you're delivering. Help them gain ownership into where they want to be, and help the owner solve that problem, to engage and encourage their own staff to be better at what they do, so the company can be better at what they do.
So you would say that the more time you invest up front, really understanding and listening and getting a good idea of what they're trying to achieve, of how the company operates, of how the different people and what roles they fulfill, and how this initiative is going to support them, the more work you put up front, the easier it's going to be to turn them into an advocate later.
All day long, and learn their culture, learn who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Become a team member.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about you, Adrian? What are some practical first steps you would advise people to take?
Yeah, I would agree. And just to go back to what Joel said earlier, is to have a plan. And, your sales team, you don't want them to be sporadic and spontaneous, trying to make this up as they go. There really should be a structured approach. And I think in that structured approach, I would really highly recommend step one, understand your customer strategically. What are the C-level executives in this organization trying to accomplish over time? When they look out 3, 5 years, 10 years into the future, where do they want to be? Then number two, what are the challenges that they are facing trying to get there? Number three, what are the metrics that need to move that will demonstrate success toward achieving their strategic objectives? And then finally, what is your value story? What is your differentiated value story? How do you remove those challenges, or minimize those challenges, or mitigate those challenges? And how do you help that organization move towards its strategic objective? And how do you do that uniquely? What is your differentiated and unique value story? I think there's a lot of investment that's required to create an advocate. And if you're doing this sort of tactically and opportunistically, you're going to be spinning your wheels. I think to do it strategically and selectively, you're going to have advocates over time who you're really going to make a significant impact with, and they're going to be happy to tell your value story.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about you, Joel? What first practical steps would you advise?
Well, first, I would re-listen to what Adrian just said, right? Because it was spot on, right? I love all
Yeah,
that. So that's your
absolutely.
first step. But secondly, listen, again, a lot of sales professionals and sales leadership. I think, and I'm going to speak directly to all of you, it is your responsibility to increase customer advocacy. It is not the job of the marketing department, okay? Now, that said, you need their help and their air coverage. So I think the very first thing you need to do is you need to look yourself in the mirror and say, is customer advocacy a part of our culture? And it either is or it is not, right? If it is, then sales management needs to make it easy and clear the path for sales people and account executives to go ahead and secure and get that advocacy. Now, where do you need your help from your marketing team? I would also go to your marketing team, and here's where the relationship is so important. What you need to help marketing understand is here's the key areas where I need advocacy. And you're free as the sales professional to speak in features, functions, pricing, value, packaging, the things that help you move a deal along, okay? It is marketing's job to understand the tactics of what you're doing and turn that into stories, turn that into a narrative, turn that into something that's a little sexy and that could be talked about with a little bit more excitement. But that can't happen unless you're having those conversations. And lastly, the last thing I would do is let's make sure as a company somebody does actually own the store. In other words, yes, it's even though I said it's the salesperson's job to go ahead and identify who those advocates are, somebody, usually in the marketing team, needs to maintain it, needs to care for it, feed it, nurture it. And I lied. There's one last thing. Look, you are all carrying high definition recording devices in your pockets in the form of your smartphone. Start getting comfortable with video. Video is used so much and so frequently, and so is ubiquitously easy to consume across every single social media platform. Start getting comfortable filming yourself, speaking in front of the camera, and then eventually getting the courage to ask your customer, hey, can you just like say what you just said to me, but just do it on film? Start doing that. And you might feel uncomfortable doing it, but I guarantee you 6 months into it, your marketing team's going to love you because now you've got an entire media library of advocacy.
Yeah, it's a great piece of advice, and it's funny that actually the piece about ownership just came up in a question earlier that I was saving for the end, and that was somebody said in our organization, when we close a customer, we kick it over to marketing to see if they can get a testimonial. That's not really an advocacy program, is it? And I think from all of you today, I think Adrian, you'd agree that's not an advocacy program.
No, not at all. And I just want to just magnify what Joel just said about getting comfortable taking out your phone. It's amazing how people, when they're expressing their advocacy for you, if you can catch them in the moment while they are emotionally impacted and emotionally engaged, that testimony and that advocacy has so much more power because subconsciously people are listening. They're not just listening to the words. They're actually feeling the emotional energy as the words are being spoken. So I think being able to capture the customer in the moment and have that in the archives is just a critical step. That's a great point.
Yeah, and I think, and what you said earlier, I've said throughout, Dennis. I mean, you need to have developed that relationship if you're going to take steps like asking them to video, etc. Right? You're going to have to make them comfortable and trusting of you.
Oh, exactly. If you don't have that type of relationship with trust, and that trust it comes from a number of ways. Number one is deliver what you say you're going to deliver. Get that respect from the customer, that you're not just there to take his money, but you're truly there with the passion to help him solve a problem.
Mm-hmm. And another good comment, obviously a bit of housekeeping here from one of our viewers is obviously you need to get them comfortable and you need to get their permission to use that video. So we're not advocating people doing any hidden camera work here with customers. Everything should be up front.
Smile, you're on candid camera.
Yeah, exactly, and or you don't want them discovering someday. Say, hey, I love that. I love that video I saw of you online. Which video? Okay, so to wrap things up, listen, this has been a great conversation, and I think there's so many great takeaways for the people who were attended today. Obviously, this will be recorded and sent out, so I encourage you to share it with other people. Our guests today have been fantastic, but what I'd like each guest is to just briefly tell the viewers and the people who are going to watch this later how they can contact each of you. So maybe Adrian, you go first and just give a brief outline of how people can find out more about you.
Sure. Best way to reach me is Adrian, Adrian, Adrian at adriandavis.com. Adrian at adriandavis.com.
Excellent. And you, Dennis?
Best way is email at dennis.synal, SYNAL at E6, the number 6, hyphen solutions.com.
Excellent. And finally, Joel.
Sure, John, thanks. So my website address is joelcap, JOELCAP.com, easy enough to remember. If you go there, you'll see all my phone number, all my social feeds, and also I'm Joel Capperella on all one word on most social networks. You could find me there as well, and let me know that you attended today, and I'd be happy to fill you in on anything else that I could maybe help you with.
Yeah, listen, fantastic. And again, this is brought to you by Pipeliner CRM, that's pipelinersales.com, and SalesPOP magazine, that's salespop.pipelinersales.com, where you'll find a lot of other videos and posts and contributions from some of the folks on our panel today. Listen, again, I'd like to thank Adrian, Dennis, and Joel for a fascinating conversation. I'm going to actually listen to it again myself and take a few notes, and also make sure that our sales and marketing group listen to it as well, to make sure that we continue to refine and hone our customer success and our customer advocacy programs. And I highly recommend that all of you do as well, and you share this with people in your organization, because I think it's invaluable advice that was given today. So again, thanks to Adrian, Dennis, and Joel. This is John Golden from Pipeliner CRM, and we'll see you all again soon. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
John.
Okay, bye now.